The woman who stepped off the train in Silverton, Colorado on that blistering June afternoon in 1882 was not the woman Jackson Vance had been expecting. But she held his name on a letter clutched in her gloved hand, and that was enough to seal both their fates. Jackson stood on the platform, hat in hand, squinting against the mountain sun as passengers disembarked. He had memorized the description from Margaret's letters over the past 6 months. Petite, blonde, blue-eyed, with a fondness for lavender. The woman who descended the train steps was tall, perhaps only 4 inches shorter than his own 6 feet, with mahogany hair that caught copper in the sunlight. Her eyes, when they swept the platform nervously, were the color of strong coffee. She wore a sensible gray traveling dress, dusty from the journey, and carried a worn carpetbag that had seen better days. Jackson almost looked past her, almost turned away to scan the remaining passengers. But then she pulled a letter from her reticule, smoothing it with trembling fingers, and he caught sight of his own handwriting on the envelope. "Mr. Vance." Her voice carried across the platform, low and slightly hoarse, nothing like the delicate tone he had imagined. He approached slowly, confusion knotting his stomach. "Yes, madam, I am Jackson Vance." Relief flooded her features, transforming her face from merely handsome to something approaching beautiful. "Thank God, I was worried I might have gotten off at the wrong station." She extended her hand in a forthright manner that surprised him. "I am Julia Emerson, not Margaret, Julia." Jackson shook her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm through the thin cotton gloves. "Miss Emerson, I am afraid there has been some mistake. I was expecting a Miss Margaret Whitmore." The relief drained from her face as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a pallor that made the freckles across her nose stand out like copper pennies. "Margaret Whitmore." "Yes, madam. We have been corresponding for half a year now. She was to arrive today to become my wife." Julia swayed slightly, and Jackson instinctively reached out to steady her elbow. She did not pull away, which told him something about how rattled she truly was. "Mr. Vance, Margaret Whitmore was my employer in Chicago. She hired me as her companion after her mother died." Julia's words came faster now, tumbling over themselves. 2 weeks ago, she met a gentleman on the street, a banker named Horace Pemberton. They fell desperately in love, and within a week they were engaged. She gave me this letter and told me I could have her train ticket west, that a good man was waiting who would provide for me, and that I should take the opportunity she no longer needed. Jackson felt the words like physical blows. He had spent his savings on the correspondence, had built a small addition to his cabin, had told everyone in town about his bride arriving. 6 months of letters, of sharing his hopes and dreams, of planning a future. Gone in an instant because some banker had caught Margaret's eye on a Chicago street. "Did she tell you anything about me?" he asked, his voice rough. Julia's eyes filled with sympathy. "Only that you were a good man, a rancher, that you lived in Colorado." She gave me the letters to read on the train journey so I would know what to expect. "Mr. Vance, I am so terribly sorry. I thought she had written to you, explained the situation. I never would have come if I had known you were unaware." The platform was beginning to clear. The train whistle blew, preparing for departure. Jackson looked at this stranger holding his letter, this woman who was not what he had expected, who had traveled across half the country on a lie. "You have anywhere else to go?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "Margaret gave me $50 and the ticket. I have no family. I was orphaned at 12 and have been working as a companion and household help ever since. I had hoped." She trailed off, pressing her lips together firmly. "It does not matter what I hoped. I will find work here. Perhaps in one of the hotels." Jackson looked up and down the dusty street of Silverton. The mining town was rough, populated mostly by men seeking silver in the San Juan Mountains. The few women who lived here were either married, working in the saloons, or running boarding houses. A woman alone, even one as capable-looking as Julia Emerson, would face difficulties he did not like to imagine. He made his decision in the space of a heartbeat, driven by something he could not name. Pride, perhaps, or stubbornness. Or maybe just the recognition that this woman had been used as carelessly as he had, and neither of them deserved to be cast aside. "Miss Emerson, I am a man of my word. I told this town I was getting married today. I prepared for a wife. I made promises." He met her startled gaze directly. "If you are willing, we will proceed as planned. You cannot be serious." But her voice held a thread of hope beneath the shock. "I am completely serious. You need a home and protection. I need a wife to help run my ranch. We have both been dealt a poor hand. We can fold, or we can play it out and see what happens." Julia studied him for a long moment. Jackson bore the scrutiny, knowing what she would see. A man of 28 years, weathered by sun and work, with dark hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that had seen both beauty and hardship in these mountains. He was not handsome in any classical sense, but he was solid, honest, and he had built something worth having with his own 2 hands. "You do not know me at all," she said quietly. "I did not know Margaret either, not really, just words on paper. At least you are here, real and honest about the situation. I could be a terrible wife. You could be, or you could be exactly what is needed." He picked up her carpetbag. "I am offering, Miss Emerson. The choice is yours. But make it now, because Reverend Thomas is expecting us at the church in 1 hour." She looked down the street, then back at him, her jaw set with determination. "I am a hard worker, Mr. Vance. I know how to cook, clean, sew, and manage a household. I can read and write and do figures. I have no experience with ranching, but I learn quickly. I do not complain and I do not shirk my duties." "That is more than I knew about Margaret," he said with a trace of bitterness. "I have a temper," she continued, as if confessing sins. "I speak my mind more than is proper. I am not delicate or refined. I am 23 years old and have never been courted because I am too tall and too plain and too forthright." Jackson felt something shift in his chest. "Miss Emerson, you are none of those things, and if you will have me, I will try to be a good husband to you." She extended her hand again. "Then I accept, Mr. Vance, and I will try to be a good wife." They shook on it like business partners, and Jackson supposed that was exactly what they were becoming. He loaded her bag into his wagon and helped her up onto the seat. As they drove through town toward his ranch, people waved and called out congratulations. Jackson waved back, acutely aware of the silent woman beside him. "It is beautiful here," Julia said finally, looking up at the towering peaks surrounding the valley. "I have never seen mountains like this. The San Juans, they can be harsh, but I have found them fair. If you work with them instead of against them, they provide." "How large is your ranch?" 300 acres. "I run cattle and some horses. It is not the biggest spread, but it is mine, free and clear. I have 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. Good men, brothers named Tom and William Garrett. They have been with me for 3 years. What will they think of this situation?" Jackson considered. "They will think I am either very lucky or very foolish. Time will tell which." Julia almost laughed, a sound that caught in her throat. "That is fair." The ranch came into view as they crested a ridge. The cabin sat in a natural bowl surrounded by pine forest, with a creek running through the property. The main house was built of logs, sturdy and well-maintained, with the new addition visible on the east side. Beyond were the barn, bunkhouse, and corrals. "It is lovely," Julia said, and he heard genuine appreciation in her voice. Jackson pulled the wagon up to the house. Tom and William emerged from the barn, curious expressions on their weathered faces. Both were in their 40s, lean and capable men who knew cattle and horses better than most. "Boys, this is Miss Julia Emerson. She is going to be my wife. We are heading to town for the ceremony shortly. Thought you should meet her first." Tom removed his hat, his eyes kind. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Emerson. Welcome to the Vance ranch." William did the same, though his gaze was more assessing. "Madam, gentlemen," Julia said, climbing down from the wagon before Jackson could assist her. "I look forward to working with you." "Would you like to see the house before we go?" Jackson asked. "You should know what you are agreeing to." Julia nodded, and he led her inside. The main room served as kitchen and living area combined, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but well made. 2 doors led to bedrooms, one his, one the new addition meant for privacy. "I built that room for my wife," he said, gesturing to the new door. "You will have your own space. I will not force any intimacy on you, Miss Emerson. We can take time to know each other properly." She turned to face him, and he saw her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You are a good man, Mr. Vance. Margaret Whitmore is a fool." "I am beginning to think I might be the lucky one in this exchange," he replied. They returned to town in the wagon, the silence between them now less awkward than contemplative. The church was small, white-painted wood with a simple steeple. Reverend Thomas waited on the steps, a portly man with a kind face and intelligent eyes. "Jackson, my boy, and this must be the bride." He took Julia's hands warmly. "I am Reverend Thomas. Welcome to Silverton." "Thank you, Reverend," Julia said quietly. "Shall we proceed? I have asked Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Patterson to serve as witnesses. They are waiting inside." The ceremony was brief and somewhat surreal. Jackson heard himself making vows to a woman he had met less than 2 hours ago. Julia's voice was steady as she repeated her own promises. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson leaned in and pressed a chaste kiss to her cheek. Her skin was warm and she smelled faintly of rose water and train smoke. Mrs. Henderson embraced Julia warmly afterward. "We will have you over for tea soon, dear. I imagine you will want to meet the other wives in town." "I would like that very much," Julia replied. Mr. Patterson, who ran the general store, shook Jackson's hand vigorously. "Congratulations. You have made a wise choice today." If only he knew how complicated the truth was, Jackson thought. But he thanked the man and guided Julia back to the wagon. They were married now. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The ride back to the ranch seemed shorter. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Julia watched the landscape with open interest, and Jackson found himself pointing out landmarks. "That ridge to the north is where the elk come down in autumn. Good hunting if you know where to wait. The creek runs year-round, fed by snowmelt. In spring it swells enough to be dangerous. You fish?" "Some. Mostly trout. Do you like fish?" "I do. I like most foods, honestly. After growing up in an orphanage where meals were sparse, I learned not to be particular." Jackson felt a pang of sympathy. "You will not go hungry here. We have beef, venison, chickens for eggs. I keep a vegetable garden, though it is not as productive as I would like. The growing season is short this high up." "I am good with gardens," Julia offered. "I managed one for Margaret's mother before she passed. Perhaps I can help improve yours." "I would appreciate that." Tom and William had supper waiting when they returned. The ranch hands had outdone themselves, preparing a roast with potatoes and carrots, biscuits, and even a dried apple pie. They ate at the long table in the main room, Julia seated at Jackson's right hand. The conversation flowed more easily than he had expected. Tom told stories about a troublesome bull they were trying to train. William shared news from town about the latest silver strike. Julia asked intelligent questions and listened with genuine interest. She had good table manners but ate with the appetite of someone who had done real work, not picking at her food like a delicate flower. After supper, Tom and William excused themselves to the bunkhouse. Jackson helped Julia clear the dishes, and they washed them together in companionable silence. "I should show you your room," he said finally. "You must be exhausted from the journey." He lit a lamp and led her to the new addition. The room was simple but clean, with a bed, dresser, wardrobe, and washstand. He had built everything himself, and the furniture showed his careful attention to detail. "I made the quilt last winter," he admitted, feeling oddly self-conscious. "I am not much for needlework, but it is warm." Julia ran her hand over the patchwork. "It is beautiful. You made this yourself." Long winter nights with little else to do. She looked at him with something like wonder. "Thank you, Jackson, for all of this, for giving me a chance." It was the first time she had used his given name, and he liked the sound of it in her voice. "Thank you for saying yes, Julia. I know this is not what you expected." "I expected nothing," she said honestly. "I hoped for kindness and safety. You have already given me more than that." He bid her good night and retreated to his own room, but sleep eluded him. He lay awake listening to the sounds of the house settling, trying to process everything that had happened. He had woken this morning as a bachelor, expecting to marry a delicate blonde woman he had never met. He was ending the day married to a tall, capable stranger with mahogany hair and eyes that held both vulnerability and strength. The next morning, Jackson woke before dawn as always and found Julia already in the kitchen, wearing a simple calico dress and apron. She had the stove fired up and was making coffee. "I hope you do not mind," she said. "I am an early riser. So am I. Did you sleep well? Better than I have in months. The quiet here is remarkable. In Chicago there was always noise." They fell into a routine with surprising ease. Julia proved to be an excellent cook, turning simple ingredients into satisfying meals. She tackled the housework with efficiency, but also turned her attention to small improvements. She sewed curtains for the windows, organized the pantry, and started a more ambitious garden plot. Jackson found himself watching her when she did not notice. The way she hummed while working, how she stopped to admire the mountains each morning, as if their beauty never became commonplace. The competent way she moved through tasks, wasting no motion. A week after their wedding, she asked if she could learn about the ranch work. "I want to be useful beyond the house," she explained. "If something happened to you or the hands, I should know how things operate." So Jackson began teaching her. She learned to ride, though she had never been on a horse before. She fell off twice the first day and got back on both times without complaint, ignoring the bruises that must have hurt terribly. She learned to mend fencing, to check cattle for illness, to identify which grazing areas were best in different seasons. "You have a natural aptitude for this," he told her one afternoon as they rode the northern pasture together. She flushed with pleasure at the compliment. "I enjoy it. There is something satisfying about this kind of work. You can see what you have accomplished at the end of the day." "That is exactly why I love ranching," he said. "I never understood men who wanted to sit behind desks in offices." "Like Horace Pemberton," Julia said, then looked startled that she had spoken the name aloud. "You mind that she chose him over this life?" Jackson asked carefully. Julia considered. "No, I think Margaret would have been miserable here. She liked fine things and society. She was not built for hard work or isolation." She met his eyes. "I think I am, though. I think I might be exactly built for this." Something warm expanded in Jackson's chest. "I am beginning to think so, too." Their relationship existed in a strange limbo. They were married but not truly husband and wife. They worked together, ate together, talked long into the evenings about everything from books to philosophies to memories from their pasts. Jackson learned that Julia's mother had died when she was young, that her father had been a teacher who drank himself to death after his wife's passing, that Julia had survived the orphanage through stubbornness and intelligence, learning everything she could from anyone willing to teach her. Julia learned that Jackson's parents had died in a house fire when he was 20, that he had used his inheritance to buy this land and build a life from nothing, that he believed in honest work and fair dealing, that he had no tolerance for cruelty or injustice. But they did not touch beyond the occasional brush of hands. They maintained separate bedrooms. Jackson wanted her, found himself increasingly drawn to her strength and spirit, but he had made a promise not to force intimacy. He would wait for a sign that she might welcome more. That sign came on a hot July afternoon when a rider arrived at the ranch in a panic. It was young David Murphy from the neighboring property. "Mr. Vance, we need help. Pa and my brothers are up in the high pasture and there has been a rock slide. Ma sent me to get whoever could come." Jackson did not hesitate. "Tom, William, saddle up. Julia, can you ride to the Patterson Ranch and send word to Doc Harrington?" Of course. She was already moving toward the barn. Jackson grabbed rope and supplies and rode hard toward the Murphy property with his hands. The rockslide had been substantial, triggered by erosion and bad luck. They found Sean Murphy trapped under a boulder, his leg clearly broken. His two older sons were trying to lever the rock off him. It took all 5 men working together to shift the boulder enough to pull Sean free. His leg was crushed badly, bone showing through torn flesh. Jackson fashioned a splint from branches while Tom rode back for a wagon to transport the injured man. By the time they got Sean back to his house, Doc Harrington had arrived. Julia was there too, helping Mrs. Murphy prepare a clean space for the doctor to work. Her sleeves were rolled up, her face calm despite the blood and chaos. "Mrs. Vance, I need boiling water, clean cloths, and whiskey," Doc Harrington said. Julia moved instantly to comply, directing Mrs. Murphy's daughters with quiet authority. Jackson watched her hold Sean down while the doctor set the broken bones, her face pale but her hands steady. She did not flinch from the blood or the screaming. It took hours. When Doc Harrington finally finished, he looked exhausted but satisfied. "He will keep the leg, though he will walk with a limp. You did good work with that splint, Jackson. And Mrs. Vance, you have a steady hand. Ever considered helping me with my rounds?" Julia smiled wearily. "I am content with ranching, Doctor, but I will help whenever needed." They rode home in darkness, both too tired for much conversation. Jackson heated water for baths, and they took turns washing away the grime and blood of the day. When Julia emerged from her room in her nightgown and wrapper, her hair hanging loose for the first time since he had known her, Jackson felt his breath catch. "I could not sleep," she said. "Too much running through my mind." "Sit with me." He gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. She settled into the chair beside him, curling her feet under her. "That was horrible today. It was. But Sean will live because you acted quickly and stayed calm." "I was terrified," she admitted, "but someone had to keep moving forward." "That is courage, Julia." Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. She looked at him in the firelight. "You were so calm, so capable. Everyone trusts you. The Murphys, our hands, the whole town. You are exactly the kind of man people rely on. I try to be worthy of that trust. You are." She reached out hesitantly and took his hand. "I want you to know that I am grateful every day that I stepped off that train and you did not send me away." Jackson laced his fingers through hers, marveling at how right it felt. "I am grateful you said yes." They sat in silence, hands joined, watching the fire burn low. When Julia finally rose to go to bed, she leaned down and kissed his forehead gently. "Good night, Jackson." "Good night, Julia." Something had shifted between them. Over the following weeks they found more excuses to touch. A hand at the small of her back as they walked, shoulders brushing as they worked side by side, fingers tangling together in quiet moments. In early August, a traveling theater troupe came to Silverton. The whole town turned out for the performance, a melodrama about star-crossed lovers that was both ridiculous and entertaining. Jackson and Julia sat together on a blanket under the stars, laughing at the overwrought performances. "You think love is ever really like that?" Julia asked as they walked home afterward. "All grand gestures and dramatic declarations." "I think real love is quieter," Jackson said. "It is in the everyday moments, making coffee before the other person wakes, learning what makes them smile, choosing them again every single day." Julia stopped walking and turned to face him. "Is that what we have been doing, choosing each other?" "I have been," he admitted. "Every day since you arrived, have you?" "Yes," she whispered. "I have been falling in love with you, Jackson Vance." Slowly, steadily, without even realizing it until recently, his heart hammered in his chest. "I have been falling in love with you too. You are nothing like I expected and everything I needed. We started this as strangers making a practical arrangement. We did. But we do not have to stay strangers." He cupped her face in his hands. "Julia, I would very much like to kiss you properly." "I would like that too." He kissed her under the star-bright Colorado sky, and it felt like coming home. She melted against him, her arms coming up around his neck, and Jackson thought he had never experienced anything so perfect. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I do not want separate bedrooms anymore," Julia said boldly. "I want to be your wife in every way." "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." They practically ran the rest of the way home, laughing like children. Inside, Jackson took her hand and led her to his room. Their room now. What followed was tender and passionate, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Julia was responsive and curious, and Jackson tried to be gentle while conveying the depth of his desire. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, skin to skin, hearts still racing. "That was," Julia searched for words, "nothing like I expected." Jackson chuckled against her hair. "Good unexpected or bad unexpected, wonderful unexpected. Why did we wait so long? Because we were being cautious and respectful and probably overthinking things." "We should stop overthinking," she decided. "Agreed." They moved her belongings into his room the next day, transforming the new addition into a proper guest room. Tom and William noticed but said nothing, though Jackson caught them exchanging knowing looks and small smiles. The ranch thrived. Julia's garden produced abundantly, and she learned to preserve and can for the winter. She took over the bookkeeping and discovered they could afford to expand the herd. Jackson taught her to shoot, and she became a fair marksman with both rifle and pistol. In October, they rode up to the high meadows to watch the aspens turn gold. The entire mountainside blazed with color, and they made camp beside a crystal lake. "I never knew the world could be this beautiful," Julia said, lying beside him under the stars. "In the orphanage, I dreamed of having a simple, safe life. I never imagined I could have this much happiness." "You deserve it all and more," Jackson said fiercely. "You deserve every good thing. I have you. That is all I need." They made love under the stars, surrounded by wilderness, and Jackson thought this must be what paradise felt like. When they returned, Julia was quieter than usual. Jackson worried he had said or done something wrong during their trip, but she assured him everything was fine. A week later, she approached him with news. "Jackson, I think I might be with child. He froze in the act of repairing a bridle. "You think I have missed my monthly courses. It is early yet, but I thought you should know." Joy flooded through him so powerfully he had to sit down. "A baby." "Possibly. Are you pleased?" He pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "Pleased does not begin to cover it. I am overwhelmed, delighted, terrified." She laughed, relief clear in the sound. "Good. That is exactly how I feel." Doc Harrington confirmed the pregnancy in November. Julia would deliver in late spring or early summer. The entire town celebrated with them. Mrs. Henderson organized a quilting bee to make baby clothes. The Murphy family, still grateful for the help during Sean's injury, gifted them a beautiful hand-carved cradle. Winter came hard and cold, but the cabin stayed warm. Jackson and Julia spent long evenings by the fire, his hand on her growing belly, feeling their child move beneath his palm. "What should we name her?" Julia asked. "What makes you think it is a girl? Just a feeling." "If it is a boy, I would like to name him after my father, Thomas Jackson Vance, and if it is a girl, you should choose." Julia considered. "Sarah, for my mother. She was kind and gentle. Everything good I remember from childhood involves her. Sarah Vance, I like it." The pregnancy was not easy. Julia struggled with sickness in the early months, though she never complained. Jackson did everything he could to make her comfortable, taking over her usual chores and fussing over her diet. "I am not made of glass," she protested when he tried to carry her over a patch of ice. "No, you are made of steel and stubbornness. But you are carrying our child, and I will be as careful with you as I please. You are impossible, and you love me anyway." "I do," she agreed, kissing him. "Very much." In April, as the snow began to melt and the first wildflowers appeared, Julia's pains began. Jackson sent Tom racing for Doc Harrington and Mrs. Henderson while he tried not to panic. Labor was long and difficult. Julia bore it with courage that humbled him, though she crushed his hand badly and cursed him thoroughly during the worst of it. "Never again," she gasped between contractions. "You did this to me, Jackson Vance, and I will never forgive you." "That is fair," he agreed, mopping her forehead. "I hate you. I love you too." But when the baby finally came, a lusty boy with a full head of dark hair, Julia wept with joy. "A son! We have a son!" Jackson held his child for the first time and felt something fundamental shift in his soul. This tiny, perfect human was his responsibility, his legacy, his heart living outside his body. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." They called him Tommy from the start. He was a healthy, hungry baby who rarely cried and seemed fascinated by everything around him. Julia recovered well from the birth, though she was tired in those first months. Jackson helped with the baby whenever he could, learning to change nappies and soothe cries. Tom and William became unlikely uncles, teaching Tommy nonsense songs and carving him toys. "You are a natural father," Julia told him one evening as they sat together, Tommy asleep between them. "I am terrified every moment that I will do something wrong. That is how I know you will do everything right." Tommy grew quickly, a bright, curious child. When he was 2, Julia told Jackson she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter Sarah arrived on a crisp October morning with minimal fuss. She had Julia's coloring, mahogany hair and dark eyes, and Jackson's stubborn chin. "Our family is complete," Julia said, nursing Sarah while Tommy played at their feet. "It is perfect," Jackson agreed. The ranch continued to prosper. Jackson expanded the herd and bought more land. Julia's business acumen proved invaluable. She negotiated better prices for their cattle and found new markets for their horses. Together, they built something substantial, a legacy for their children. Tommy showed early signs of being a natural horseman. Sarah was more interested in books and plants, spending hours in the garden with her mother. Jackson loved them both with a fierceness that sometimes frightened him in its intensity. In the summer of 1889, 7 years after Julia had stepped off that train, Jackson came in from the fields to find his wife sitting on the porch, watching their children play in the creek under Tom's supervision. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her. "How strange life is. How one decision, one moment can change everything. Are you sorry you got on that train?" She looked at him with eyes full of love. "I am grateful every single day. Margaret gave me the greatest gift possible, even if she did not mean to. She gave me you. I was so angry when you first arrived, so disappointed that you were not what I expected. And now I cannot imagine it any other way. You are exactly what I needed, Julia. You are my partner, my love, my home. You gave me a home when I had none, purpose when I was adrift, love when I thought I was unworthy of it. You were always worthy. I was just lucky enough to see it." They sat together, hands joined as they had that first night by the fire, watching their children play. Tommy splashed in the water while Sarah gathered smooth stones for some project only she understood. The mountains rose around them, eternal and beautiful, and Jackson thought about how far they had come from that awkward meeting on the train platform. "Do you ever think about what Margaret is doing now?" Julia asked. "Not really. I hope she is happy with her banker, but I do not think about what might have been. How could I, when what I have is so much better than anything I imagined? You sweet talking rancher," she teased. "Just speaking the truth, Mrs. Vance." That evening they gathered for supper as they always did. Tommy chattered about the frog he had caught and released. Sarah wanted to know if they could plant more flowers near the house. Julia served her delicious stew and fresh bread. Tom and William argued good-naturedly about the best way to break a new horse. After the children were in bed and the hands had retired to the bunkhouse, Jackson and Julia sat together in their room. "Another day done," Julia said, brushing out her long hair. Jackson watched from the bed, never tiring of these simple domestic moments. "Come here." She set down the brush and came to him, letting him pull her into his arms. They lay together, comfortable in the silence. "I love you," he said, as he did every night. "I love you too," she replied, as she always did. It was simple and true and more than enough. The years continued to roll past, marked by small triumphs and minor setbacks. A harsh winter that tested their preparations. A spring flood that damaged fencing. Tommy breaking his arm falling from the barn loft. Sarah winning a prize at the county fair for her pumpkins. Through it all, Jackson and Julia faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. They added more hands as the ranch grew. They built a proper schoolhouse in Silverton so their children could receive a good education. They became pillars of their community, the couple people turned to for advice and help. On their 10th anniversary, Jackson took Julia back to the train platform where they had first met. "A decade ago, a woman stepped off this train with my name on a letter," he said. "She was not the woman I expected, but she was the woman I needed. She became my wife, the mother of my children, my best friend and greatest love." Julia's eyes filled with tears. "Jackson Vance, you are going to make me cry. I have something for you." He pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band set with a small diamond. "I never gave you a proper engagement ring. I want to remedy that now." She held out her hand, which already bore the plain gold band he had placed there on their wedding day. He slipped the new ring on beside it. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you, not as beautiful as the life we have built together." She kissed him there on the platform, not caring who might see. "I would do it all again. Every moment, every choice, every step that led me to you." They walked through town hand in hand, greeting neighbors and friends. This place that had been strange to Julia 10 years ago was now completely home. She knew every street, every shop, every family. She had helped deliver babies, nursed the sick, celebrated weddings, and mourned funerals. She was woven into the fabric of this community as surely as Jackson was. That night, they made love with the passion of newlyweds and the tenderness of long partnership. Afterwards, Julia traced the lines of his face in the moonlight. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked. "Only that I did not recognize my good fortune immediately. I wasted time mourning what I thought I wanted instead of embracing what I had been given. We both needed time. We were strangers trying to build something real, and we succeeded beyond my wildest dreams." Tommy and Sarah grew into fine young people. Tommy was quiet and thoughtful, with a deep connection to the land and animals. Sarah was bold and clever, always asking questions and pushing boundaries. They were different as night and day, but devoted to each other. When Tommy was 15 and Sarah 13, a group of cattle rustlers tried to hit the Vance ranch. Jackson and his hands drove them off, but not before shots were fired. No one was seriously hurt, but it shook the family badly. "I cannot lose you," Julia said that night, holding Jackson tightly. "You have to promise me you will be careful." "I promise. But Julia, this is the life we chose. It has risks." "I know. That does not make it easier." They hired more security after that, and Jackson taught both children to shoot properly. He wanted them prepared to defend themselves and their home if needed. The incident with the rustlers brought them closer to the Murphy family, whose eldest son David had ridden over to help when he heard the shots. David and Sarah began a friendship that made both sets of parents exchange knowing looks. "She is too young," Julia fretted. "She is 13, and it is just friendship. For now, but I see how he looks at her. The way I look at you, exactly, which is why I am concerned." Jackson laughed and pulled her close. "Let them be young. There is time enough for romance later." But Sarah was not interested in David Murphy, much to everyone's surprise. She announced at 16 that she wanted to go to college to study agriculture and science. "I want to learn new techniques, bring them back to help the ranch," she explained. "The world is changing, and we need to change with it." Jackson was initially resistant. The idea of his daughter leaving, going to some city far away, terrified him, but Julia supported Sarah's dreams. "We raised her to be strong and independent," she reminded him. "We cannot be surprised when she acts that way." So Sarah went to Colorado Agricultural College in Fort Collins. She wrote home weekly, her letters full of excitement about her studies. She came home for summers and holidays, bringing new ideas and innovations that did improve the ranch's operations. Tommy stayed home, content with the life he knew. He married at 22, a sweet girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch. They built a house on Vance land and began their own family, giving Jackson and Julia grandchildren to dote on. Sarah returned after college with a degree and a fiancé, a fellow student named Robert, who shared her passion for agricultural innovation. Jackson liked the young man, appreciated his intelligence and work ethic. They married in a simple ceremony at the ranch, and Sarah continued to be involved in managing the operation while pursuing her research. Jackson and Julia watched their children build their own lives with pride and a touch of melancholy. "We are getting old," Julia said one evening. She was 50 now, her hair streaked with silver but still beautiful to Jackson's eyes. "Speak for yourself. I am in my prime," he joked. At 55, he felt every year in his joints some mornings. "Our babies are grown. We have grandchildren now, a different kind of blessing." Julia leaned into his shoulder. "I am grateful for all of it, every single moment." They began to slow down, letting Tommy and Sarah take on more responsibility for the ranch. Jackson still rode out most days, unable to imagine not working the land he loved. Julia maintained her garden and spent time with her grandchildren, teaching them the same lessons she had taught her own children. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Tommy and Emma with their 3 children, Sarah and Robert with their twins. Tom and William, now in their 70s but still hale, had retired to a small house on the property. New hands worked the ranch, but the core remained the same. Jackson stood and raised his glass. 25 years ago, I stood on a train platform waiting for a bride I had never met. The woman who stepped off was not who I expected. She was better, stronger, more capable and loving than I could have imagined. Julia, you are my heart. You made me a better man. You gave me this beautiful family, this wonderful life. Every day with you has been a gift. Julia wiped her eyes. You gave me a home when I had none. You saw value in me when I felt worthless. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. These 25 years have been the greatest joy of my life. Their children and grandchildren cheered. They cut the cake Julia had made, a towering confection that would have impressed any Chicago bakery. They danced under the stars as a hired fiddle player provided music. Jackson waltzed with Julia, remembering the first time he had held her in his arms. 25 more years, he asked. At least, she promised. They did not get 25 more years. 11 years later, on a cold December morning, Jackson went out to check on a horse who was foaling and did not return. Julia found him in the barn, collapsed beside the mare and her new colt. The doctor said his heart had simply given out. He was 66 years old. Julia thought she might die from the grief. The man who had been her partner for 36 years, her love, her home, was gone. Tommy and Sarah held her together through those first dark days. The funeral was attended by everyone in 3 counties. Jackson Vance had been beloved, respected, a man of integrity and kindness. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, where he could watch over the land he had built. Julia stood at the graveside long after everyone else had left. I do not know how to do this without you, she whispered to the fresh earth. You were supposed to be here. But she was stronger than she knew, forged by years of hard work and partnership. She grieved deeply but did not break. Tommy and Sarah tried to convince her to move in with one of them, but she refused. This is my home. I will stay here as long as I am able. She lived another 12 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. Her final years were full of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, of tending her beloved garden, of quiet evenings remembering the man she had loved. They buried her beside Jackson on that hill. Tommy and Sarah stood together, their own children around them, mourning the woman who had been the center of their world. She was supposed to be the wrong woman, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. But she was exactly right. They both were, Tommy agreed. They found each other and built something beautiful. The Vance Ranch continued through the generations, a testament to the partnership between a cowboy who needed a wife and a woman who needed a home. The story became family legend, told to each new generation. How Julia Emerson stepped off a train in Silverton, Colorado in 1882, with a letter meant for someone else. How Jackson Vance married her anyway, a decision that seemed reckless but proved perfect. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the land, still live in houses on property Jackson claimed and Julia nurtured. The original cabin stands preserved, a museum to their legacy. Visitors come to hear the story of the mail-order bride, who was the wrong woman, and the cowboy who saw her worth anyway. But to those who knew them, who remember the way Jackson looked at Julia even after decades of marriage, the way Julia's face lit up when he walked into a room, There was nothing wrong about their match. It was destiny, fate, fortune. Call it what you will. Two broken pieces that fit together perfectly, creating something whole and beautiful and enduring. And if you stand on that hill at sunset, where two gravestones mark the resting place of Jackson Vance and Julia Emerson Vance, you can almost feel the love that still binds them. A love that started with a mistake and became the greatest truth of their lives. A love that proved the wrong woman could be exactly right if given a chance to show her worth. A love that lasted beyond death, living on in the land they nurtured, the family they created, the legacy they left behind. Their story is one of courage and choice, of seeing past expectations to embrace reality. It speaks to the power of second chances, of recognizing value where others saw none. Jackson could have sent Julia away, could have mourned his lost bride and waited for another. Julia could have moved on, found work elsewhere, built a different life. But they chose each other again and again, day after day, year after year. In the end, that is what love is. Not a feeling but a choice. Not destiny but daily decision. Not perfection but partnership through all the imperfect moments that make up a life. The wrong woman stepped off the train with his name on a letter. The cowboy married her anyway. And together, they proved that sometimes the most beautiful love stories start with a mistake that turns out to be the best decision either person ever made. Their legacy lives on not just in the land and the family, but in the reminder that taking a chance on someone unexpected can lead to the greatest joy imaginable. Years pass, seasons change, but the story remains. A testament to love, faith, and the courage to embrace the unexpected. Jackson and Julia Vance built more than a ranch. They built a life, a family, a love that time itself cannot diminish. And that is the greatest legacy of all.